like to invite our first speaker for this morning, Mr. Craig Dore, Lead IAM Strategist for the RSA APJ, to talk about Are We There Yet? Cybersecurity in the post-COVID era. Craig, please.
Thank you, and good morning, and thank you, AiSP, for inviting RSA to be a member of this and to present today. My name is Craig, and I've been with RSA for almost 20 years, and certainly in cybersecurity over 20 years. And today we're going to talk about, against the backdrop of something that we all know and don't really love, which is the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm going to relate my personal experience around that historically over since, I guess, March of this year. And second, I'm going to be talking about some of the trends that RSA has seen and articulated. I just want to circle back and really reflect upon Mr. Coe and Ms. Introduction, really compelling. I think one of the aspects around SME as a business operation is that cybersecurity is out of reach for the budgets and the scale that SMEs operate in, whereas RSA has literally made a conscious effort to put our tools and technologies for cybersecurity within the reach of the SME market. And secondly, getting from A to B in the most cost-effective and efficient way possible is something that we absolutely focus on. And I won't. And I will definitely underscore one of the key themes that Ms. Wong threw, which was the human element and cybersecurity awareness. Humans are the real perimeter in every organization. And that's something that, for me personally, I espouse from the perspective of cybersecurity awareness, training, and then testing and checking. So these are great initiatives to be doubled down upon from Singapore's cyber agency. Now let's return to what this presentation is about. I think the idea around a post-COVID era, actually a bit of a joke. There will never be a post-COVID era. COVID-19 and associated mutagens are always going to be part of the landscape going forward. And I think we've seen the social impacts from the perspective, in-person meetings, and this very conf itself has gone to virtual. And I think that's basically a testimony around what we're going to be seeing more and more of in the future. Now let's just ramp this forward from the perspective of what I'm going to be talking about. I'll be talking about global trends very quickly, and then talk about some of the risks that we've seen and some of my personal experiences with organizations that face these challenges. And then we're going to provide some recommendations around sort of wins that a given SME could accomplish with respect to cybersecurity. And then finally, we'll talk about the concept of what's termed as zero trust. So these are all images that I'll share with you. These are well known to everybody that's participating today. I used to live in Manhattan. Seeing 7th Avenue like this is absolutely nothing that one has ever seen before. I think that has really all touched our businesses, our hearts, our homes, our face in some way or other. And I'm sure that we will get through it, hopefully when a vaccine is developed, but these are going to be images that we're going to be seeing play out again and again and again. There are two experts that I've seen. One is Dr. Edward Strauss, who advises the U.S. debate around cybersecurity. And in relation to COVID-19, the attack likelihood is almost guaranteed for any organization out there, because a lot of the people who prey upon those who are not cybersecurity mature, and also against the backdrop of the global work from home experiment that we've all been experiencing, the likelihood of an attack is just almost guaranteed. And preying upon those who aren't really cybersecurity experts in their own right, or even ones who are experienced like myself. I've certainly seen attempts on my own personal home network from my perspective. Second, with respect to COVID-19, there's a famous epidemiologist named Michael Osterholm, who Dr. Osterholm wrote a book in 2020 called The Deadliest Enemy. I'll talk about what he says a little bit later, but he was warning around our lack of response or our unpreparedness globally around something like this. He was warning about this in 2017. So it's certainly shouldn't be prize, but I think it has been, and certainly the impacts have been ranging from everything from government to economies. The global recession is being warned about. Individual businesses, of course, have been impacted. I've seen walking through shopping centers with shopping stores closed permanently as a result. I think one thing that I'm going to key in on is the global supply chain. And this is one aspect that Dr. Osterholm articulated, in that many medicines that are literally on crash carts in hospitals are sourced in one place, which is China. And I'm not here to pick on China for any reason, but having a single source for critical medicines and having a supply chain totally oriented around it, obviously that would break the back of anybody. And so one aspect around seeing what the cybercrime landscape against this backdrop has been, RSA provides a quarterly fraud report that anybody can download. And this is authored by a group of people who literally live in what's termed the dark web, or the so-called private internet, that hackers will share credentials that they win, bank account records, passwords, and so on, in giant drops that people can either share free or actually pay for. And as a result of that research organization within RSA, we produce regularly a quarterly fraud report. And the most recent one details some of the intelligence gained around the COVID exploitations that's happening. And so here's a little bit of a screenshot from the report, which keys in on actual examples. One particularly egregious, where hackers were posing as the World Health Organization to trick people into downloading an app, clicking a link, and so on. This is real. We see this all the time. It's not a contrivance, a security vendor. We literally can fire forget with this. We see it all the time. Some examples, just really quickly, literally Android and iOS apps that actually present some value to the person who's tricked into downloading this app to their phone. It gives real-time COVID maps or heat maps around hot zones, as it were. And of course, once you install this app and you use it, you're going to get owned. Your credentials will be stolen for whatever purpose. So I'm going to move on from that. I think that these are all examples that we're all literally aware of, very, very well aware of. And so what I do is relate some recommendations that even an SME, a smaller business with smaller budgets and smaller organization, can actually accommodate in their world. And so I'm going to just flip things around. So these are basically the major categories that I'm going to drill into really quickly. In relation to a surge in the work from home or the global workforce experiment, this is literally boots on the ground experience with organizations who are just not prepared and have erected systems that probably need a good review. And I've seen literal examples of organizations that sent everybody home but didn't have enough VPN licenses in place to be able to accommodate that. And a second is, and Ms. Wong touched on this, multi-factor authentication or strong two-factor authentication is not out of reach of an SME. The amount that you would need to spend in terms of just uplifting that security in terms of an easy win for remote access is absolutely something that is within reach. Second is, and I've seen this again from the VPN platform, VPN is running software. Even generally a virtual private network is a device. It's a hardware device that you plug into your network, but they have software running in them and ensuring that you have good hygiene around patching of those critical systems. And then of course, if you can't afford VPN multi-factor for everybody, at least have the administrator do it. That's just the basics. And I think one of the aspects from an organization leading their employees and sending them home is definitely help them and help them help themselves. The idea of setting down clear boundaries of acceptable use during work on, say, maybe even a personal device that's being used in the context of work, and even providing guidance for their own use of their own Wi-Fi. As an example, unsecured Wi-Fi is very common. I've heard an actual example of somebody who their own Wi-Fi was down at home, so they used what they thought was their neighbors. They lived in an apartment building. They used an unsecured Wi-Fi that they thought was their neighbors, and it wasn't. It was actually somebody who was trying to do evil. So providing guidance, there's another aspect to it in terms of home Wi-Fi. You have a set of ISPs or internet providers that your own users are using at home. Um, providing them some guidance point, a touch point with that ISP to ensure that the modem software is up to date, that they have good password and secure protocol to connect to that Wi-Fi. So helping your users get to a better state in terms of their own utilization of Wi-Fi is an easy win and reduces the attack surface area that could be turned around to victimize you. Now, one aspect is obviously the use of SaaS and PaaS and IaaS and so on. Obviously, that's ramping up significantly and against the backdrop. Now, you know, because VPNs tend to require strong authentication because it's somebody who's working from home, that's no less true for a SaaS application. If you're using something like Office or Workday or ServiceNow or whatever, the idea of that not protecting access to that SaaS application out of your control, you are a remote user when you're using a SaaS application. One easy win, and I love easy wins, is the use of a popular variant of authentication referred to as FIDO or a FIDO device, the most popular being a YubiKey. I'm going to talk about that just in a moment, but this is really in response to strongly authenticating both in your personal life and then also into your organization's use of SaaS applications. So I'll talk about that more specifically in a second. Again, in the zipping around that everybody did to erect systems to support surge and work from home, I think a lot of people are using their own computers, their own home PCs and so on to work information, or they've been sent home with a laptop that they were just handed the previous day. Now, considering now that you can remote deploy software for endpoint protection, so for example, requiring some form of authentication other than a password when you get into it, but also having a second look at your spam and email filters, ensuring you have some range of backups in play on an institutional level, super important. And so it's now that we have some breathing space here, I think it's a good place to focus in on the backups, because even myself working from home, it was only by accident that I backed up my PC, my entire PC, my work PC, and then the next day the PC died. If I hadn't have done that by accident, I would have been dead in the water. And then, of course, everybody knows about the new household names. Skype has certainly been around since 2004 or somewhere. Zoom is a relatively new player. They kind of deserve the bad reputation that they have because they were routing, they were not using encryption or security at all, routing your data through all sorts of countries in the middle. And one aspect is do not use anything free. Don't use any free conferencing tools. If it is free,
and
sorry,
the fifth person in the chat, Donovan. Okay.
Sorry, can the organizers mute this guy while I'm talking? That would be appreciated. Just to circle up on that, I want to pay attention to a very popular app that's used throughout the world called WhatsApp. WhatsApp is owned by Facebook, and I consider WhatsApp to be actually institutional spyware. And I think from a social perspective, it's fine, but from using it in terms of work chat and business discussions, it's really not appropriate. And there are secure alternatives out there. One is called Signal. I think culturally, it's very commonplace to use WhatsApp because it's easy. Well, it's easy for a reason. And if you have any sensitive information that's going to be shared from person to person over a mobile network, definitely reconsider the use of WhatsApp, or at least remind your users of the dangers of WhatsApp. And that's me on my pedestal there. All right. Moving tracks just a little bit. Social engineering is real. This is a link. I would have played it, but I'm not going to. I would encourage you to get the slide deck from me after this and watch this video, because this video could form part of any kind of social cybersecurity awareness training. This actually shows a social hacker who just uses a phone and a laptop to steal the credentials of a reporter who willingly became victimized by her. Excellent example of voice phishing, just using, you know, the power of her speech to trick somebody who wants to help on the other end of the line. And so if you have customer facing call centers dealing with customers and helping them through things, that's something that they should definitely be aware around the dangers. Now back to YubiKey really quickly. So this represents a fast identity line or FIDO contrivance. It's not an RSA contrivance. Really consider your use of this, especially for privileged users. It's tap and go technology. It's just like you know, when you have an NFC reader, you can tap it, and it's just like buying a coffee. But one of the things around FIDO is it's a security mechanism that literally eliminates the risk of phishing into an application protected by FIDO. This is not like this is what I call the security industry get act together, and I think the appetite for an organization shouldn't be any smaller than it is in terms of accommodating an aspect of FIDO in your world, or especially for privileged use. But these keys are dual purpose. You can literally use one to protect your own cloud applications in your personal life, such as, you know, if you use Dropbox or even Gmail, Office, and so on. These can be used to eliminate the risk of phishing, which is very real. Great. And so from the RSA side, we produce a modern MFA app. Ms. Wong at the start said, you know, this increases friction when using strong authentication to get into, say, your bank. But when you use it in the enterprise, you can literally just use Touch ID on your iPhone to use a low friction method to secure with strong, modern, multi-factor authentication to any resource that might be protected by RSA. And this is very cost effective for an SME to use. Now, I'm just going to switch gears because I'm mindful of my time and yours. Now, one of the aspects around the hype cycles in cybersecurity, this one has really ramped up significantly in the last 6 months. And this is the concept referred to as zero trust. Now, just to introduce it, zero trust is legitimate. It has some really credentialed people who are articulating its virtues, and certainly it has value from the perspective of heightening your cybersecurity approach for your organization. And it doesn't need to be, you know, everything needs to be zero trust and no user trusted. I think the divide and conquer approach to zero trust is worthy, and I just bear that in mind as we go through it. And so zero trust is coined as a phrase by a fellow by the name of John Kindervog from Forrester Research back in 2010, and he articulated the idea around zero trust, not trusting anything, any person that comes in to access something. You do not trust them, and the results should be fairly clear. Now, what it does is it takes an existing cybersecurity adage that's been around for a very long time, is, well, trust the person or trust the application, but always verify. And that's certainly, well, in this context, trust or giving something that is trustworthy is kind of a bad thing in the world of cybersecurity. Does application that you're using, is it trustworthy? How do you get to this, I do trust it or I don't trust it? And one of the things that we want to do is kind of flip it on its head, is effectively no trust, don't trust anything, and always verify. Now, let us unpack that, because trust in this example is a bit of a leap of faith, right? We have this, the idea of trust is bad in the cybersecurity world. Getting to a place where you never trust and always verify, well, Ms. Wong articulated that friction aspect around accessing your bank. We need to really distinguish between the concept of trusting something and having something be trustworthy. So some of the aspects around zero trust is it's really ramped up in terms of people's awareness in cybersecurity around what it is. But when you have something that's really in a hype cycle around cybersecurity, you run the risk of the concept being misunderstood or misappropriated by some vendor who wants to sell you something. Now it's nothing new. There's been a long history dating back all the way to 1976 with Salzer talking about the concept of least privilege, all the way back to 1994 with someone who referred to in an internet RFC called the soft and chewy center of your cyber approach. And they referred to it literally as something called a Tootsie Roll, which is a confection or a candy where it's hard on the outside, chocolate, and then toffee on the inside. So nothing new from John Kindervag from Forrester, and he extols the virtue of zero trust around some concepts, right? And the idea is that all resources should be accessed in a manner regardless of location, right? And regardless of where the user is or what they're coming in from or what device they're using. Well, that aspect of zero trust is well supported by your vendor ecosystem. Second is access control. So, should this person access, how do we review that? And most importantly around access control is the supported in a NIST paper. If you're familiar with the National Institute of Standards and Technology that writes all sort of guidance for cybersecurity, one of the papers dealing with zero trust talks about something called microsegmentation or microservicing. Super duper important. It's important to have a look at how you segment the access on your network from software-defined infrastructure or VLAN. This is totally critical, but you don't need to apply this to the whole environment. Really just pick the top critical assets. And that aspect around inventory and asset management becomes into play. You need to know what your business critical systems are. And so gaining a visibility around that, and then getting a visibility on whom should have access to those things, and an automated approach to get that access and then prove them every time, absolutely critical, no question about it. And then of course, from a holistic standpoint, regardless of endpoint, whether it's a SaaS, perimeter, or on-prem application, being able to not only react against events that happen from those infrastructure components, but also being able to peer into the network. So I'll reference Ms. Wong again, who referred to the CCTV outside of your building. This aspect around packet detection and packet construction and monitoring is literally a CCTV camera for your network. And when paired with an accomplished or seasoned analyst to actually know what a zero-day attack might look like or what privilege escalation might look like, is an absolutely compelling part of where you could get to with zero trust. None of this is new. These are all established methodologies and aspirations and philosophies around cybersecurity writ large. So zero trust, really talks about never trust and always verify. That's a good summary of what the zero trust aspiration is. But if you look at, can you actually get to a never trust place? Meaning, you're running software on a phone, you're running software application or PC. What compiler was used to create that software? Do you trust it? Or where did your laptop CPU come from? What was the supply chain in order for you to get that device in your hands, right? And so getting to a place where you're embracing never trust is impossible. And similarly, from an infrastructure standpoint, dealing with always verify also seems impossible, both from a user friction perspective and also from your actual operational capability to ensure user access is appropriate every single time. So I think that we need to kind of flip it on its head in a way, reducing in a meaningful way the trust surface of your infrastructure, your users, your devices, and your applications. That is more realistic or pragmatic approach in terms of espousing the zero trust as a concept. And one way or methodology around reducing the surface of trust that you will do in practice really is to understand fully what the business requirement is first. And so as an example is you might actually, go to a always verify methodology for your customers. Is that really something that it would be a tremendously bad idea if your bank was required a multi-step authentication process to access your bank account. Really bad idea. So that takes into context the business requirement around what it is that you're trying to accomplish. And second, taking a risk-oriented, so dollars spent per risk should be, again, appropriate in terms of your investment. And so, for example, many people who aren't even a banking customer can go onto a banking website and browse their services and their products and solutions and so on. But really, it gets very, very pointy and more difficult when you actually try to transact. And knowing the difference, the risks around those two things in terms of your investment dollars is super important. So a risk-oriented approach is critical in that aspect. So again, back to NIST around SP 800-207, which is their documented response to zero trust, really talks about 7 tenets of zero trust. And I'm not going to drill into individual ones. I think if I were to pull back from a little bit, taking that holistic approach around what you're trying to do and why, and then really keying in on the most business critical aspects inside of your environment that would make, basically, if they're owned, they would prevent you from doing business. And that divide and conquer approach is a good starting point that doesn't need to boil the ocean with a giant zero trust concept. And certainly RSA's response to the zero trust really just is a philosophy applied to more holistic use of products and services to deliver an appropriate zero trust response. And certainly other vendors as well being brought into the mix to provide a more comprehensive, full-featured approach to it. And one aspect around how we do inventory prioritization, asset management is a platform called Governance Risk and Compliance, or the Archer platform business collaboration tool that helps organizations, embark upon that in terms of asset inventory or asset criticality. So some key takeaways from a zero trust capacity. Zero trust, and if any vendor comes to you and said, we're going to take you to zero trust, you just buy our product, is actually not true. Zero trust is a mindset. It's a philosophy. It's not a product. It's not a strategy. And it really needs to be tailored from that perspective to your organization. I've provided some more meaningful ways that you can put it into practice from this perspective. Second, this is nothing new. So if anyone's going to come to you and tell you, zero trust is the greatest, latest thing, is not being truthful. And then finally, taking that risk, that contextual view around approaching it from a holistic portfolio of products, not just from RSA, but a whole ecosystem of vendors that will deliver it. And microsegmentation is one aspect to it. And so I think just lifting off, one necessary component of any kind of mature cybersecurity model is really talk about Syslog and SIEM as a SOC tool. Not all organizations use a SIEM or have a dedicated SOC in place, but I think that the notion of delivering some aspect around contextual awareness on the network of user behavior, for easy one is privilege. You can't see that by looking at it at the Windows logs or the Active Directory logs. You need a tool to help you do that. And obviously the RSA Net Witness Suite plays into that. And then the idea is that having an analyst flag a user as being maybe high risk to deny future access requests or their account has been owned. These are real life examples that are actually epitomized within the tools, underlying tools. And so let me circle up. So I'm out of time in 1 minute. So some final words. Let's get back to the users. The real perimeter of any organization is your employees. And the idea is that security awareness training, do not de-emphasize it in your strategy. And security awareness training is not necessarily an expensive thing to be doing. I think the idea, from my perspective as a seasoned security professional, is great. Do that training, but if you're going to emphasize anything in that training, is to definitely test regularly. Absolutely. Proofpoint is a global vendor that does this stuff. I'm not saying use Proofpoint, I'm just giving you an example. But the idea is that you test your users not to fix them or fix their behavior, but to identify the people who are more susceptible to the trickery that goes on out there. And so identifying the high-risk users is really a necessary component of a training regime. So applying that training, doing the testing, but really focusing in on the people who get owned. And I hope you enjoyed that. Certainly join us in our virtual booth at the RSA booth here at this conference. And thank you very much. And that's me. Thanks very much.